taking home a $50,000 championship bonus. To do so, each must be confident of harnessing the 5,000 nitro-generated horsepower necessary to lead a team to victory over worthy opponents. Each driver, in his or her own way, personifies the unlimited potential of NHRA Top Fuel racing. So today, the elite of the Top Fuel pilots meet on the quarter-mile battleground at Pomona to determine which is best, each knowing that only one can emerge as champion of the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. The National Hot Rod Association presents Championship Drag Racing on ESPN Speed World. The NHRA, the world's largest motorsports sanctioning body, showcasing speeds in excess of 290 miles an hour and traveling the quarter mile in less than 5 seconds. Championship Drag Racing from the NHRA. These 7 great Top Fuel drivers have but one thought on their minds this bright, sunshiny day here in Pomona, California, and that is stopping the low qualifier in the Budweiser Classic. The 7th annual running of this event will pay $50,000 to the winner. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave McClelland, and the man that is qualified number 1 is the man that has won 5 out of 6 of these events, and that is Joe Amato. Joe, can you win today?
Well, it's going to be tough. The track conditions have changed a lot. The sun's come out here at Pomona, and we're just going to go out and try and do our best. You know, every time you win one of these things 5 out of 6 times, it puts a lot more pressure on Team Valvoline and all. I'm just going to have to rely on the A-team and Tim Richards carrying me through and try and do my job out there.
For more on this year's running of the Budweiser Classic for Top Fuel dragsters, here's my good friend Steve Evans.
David, down here at the far end, I'm reminded that the only driver to ever defeat Joe Amato in Bud Classic competition was Big Daddy Don Garlitz. And that happened back in 1986, the final round. Big Daddy just outpowered Joe.
Joe Amato wants a rubber man.
Now, the driver with the best chance of outpowering Joe again, preventing him from winning 5 classics in a row, may be Don the Snake Prudhomme. Fresh off a big win a few weeks ago in Dallas, and he loves this racetrack. And more importantly, they are qualified on opposite sides of the ladder and cannot get together until the final round, if indeed they both make it that far. So, gentlemen, start your engines. Always wanted to say that. That's good.
Steve, I think you finally found your calling. Before we get to racing, a bit of business. The number 1 qualifier at 17 events throughout the year earned 175 points in decreasing amounts down to the 16th qualifier with 85. They were all totaled up, and at season end, Joe Amato came home the number 1 qualifier with 2,795 points. The number 8 qualifier, Dick LaHaye. In the number 2 spot, Don Prudhomme at 25.55, while Gene Snow, number 7, had 1,980. The third pair we'll see. Frank Hawley, the number 3 qualifier with 24.65. Laurie Johns qualified in the number 6 spot. And our final pair, Kenny Bernstein, number 4, against Eddie Hill, number 5. The 8 best Top Fuel dragster drivers in the country. Earlier, Steve took a look at a typical Top Fuel dragster.
Using Kenny Bernstein's car, let's talk specifications on Top Fuel dragsters. You know, like they do in those magazine road tests. Car handles very well down the track because it's built to NHRA's maximum wheelbase of 300 inches. Steering is very nimble, built to NHRA's minimum weight of 1,925 pounds. Now, the engine is the largest they'll allow, 500 cubic inches. It uses 2 magnetos, the most you can have, 2 pumps, and the largest blower possible, all about 5,000 horsepower. So acceleration is impressive. Kenny takes 5 G's off the starting line. The car goes 0 to 60 miles an hour in 0.3 of a second, 0 to 100 in 1 second, 250 at the 8th mile, 290 at the finish line. It is maintenance intensive, though. You think Jaguars are bad, you got to rebuild this sucker every 5 seconds. And you talk about braking, deploy both chutes, and Kenny takes 5 negative G's at the finish line. Now, let's talk fuel economy. There isn't any.
Sure there is, Steve. About 20 to 25 gallons to the mile. The 1991 NHRA Budweiser Classic is being brought to you by Quaker State. The Big Q is One Top Motor Oil. We're getting set to go here in Pomona, California, as Don Prudhomme gets into his car under the watchful eyes of his crew chief, John Medlin. The Snake will be racing Gene Snow. Round 1 racing coming up next. drivers in the world today. And our first pair pits two Winston champions. Dick LaHaye won the Winston crown back in 1987. His competition, Joe Amato, is the reigning Winston champ, and we're riding on board our camera mounted high atop the wing on Joe's Team Valvoline special. Not only is Amato the reigning Winston champ, he is also the king of the classic. Why? Because he has won this event 5 previous times, losing it only once, as Steve told us earlier, to Don Garlits back in 1986. The heat today has caused a lot of problems for racers. This Budweiser Classic is just part of the qualifying program for the Winston Finals, and we have found a lot of top fuel drivers having their share of problems. Those problems create extra pressure on the crew chief. For Dick LaHaye, it's his daughter, Kim. While for Joe Amato, it's the general, Tim Richards, turning the wrenches on Amato's car. The lane choice in this bearing goes to Amato by virtue of his #1 qualifying spot. The low qualified car in round 1 gets to pick the lane. In the subsequent rounds, it's whoever has the quicker ET of the previous session. Amato is in the far lane from our cameras. We're again on top of Joe Amato's wing. Thundering down the quarter mile to a fabulous lap time, and that's a shocker. 498 at 284 miles an hour. With the heat and the temperature today, nobody expected a 4-second time, and Amato pulls one out right off the bat. Here's Lori Johns. She's coming out of her pit area, headed to the staging lanes. She'll be racing Frank Hawley in round 1 of the Budweiser Classic. That'll be coming up in just a few moments. Up on the line right now, the thunder of Gene Snow and his Mopar dragster. The #7 qualifier going off against the #2 car, the Skull Bandit, driven by Don Prudhomme. Prudhomme, with the lane choice, has picked the lane where he just saw a 4-second elapsed time. Let's go to the far end, and Steve is with Joe Amato.
Awfully nice, 498.
The track, you see everybody out there smoking the tires, you know, and Timmy said be ready to pedal it, and all I kept waiting for is at the start of rattling tires, and you know, lucky the A-team and Tim Richards gave me a good run.
And the more you win, maybe the more the numbers are against you.
Oh, there's no doubt. The odds keep going up. You know, if you were an odds maker making the bet, you'd give me a pretty good bet that I'm never going to get to the final of this one.
Joe Amato showing a bit of the pressure that is on him, but that 498 certainly has got to bolster his confidence here in his 7th Budweiser Classic for top fuel dragsters. For Prudhomme, he's got the confidence of knowing that that stretch of 1,320 feet of racing surface has just yielded a 498. He hopes he can duplicate it. Of course, the #7 qualifier, Gene Snow, says, no way, I'm going to use the other lane to my advantage and pick up the win and advance to the final 4. The work by the crews completed. It is all up to the 2 drivers. Don Prudhomme in the far lane. Gene Snow nearest the camera. They come in and stage oh so carefully. When all 4 lights at the top of the tree are lit, at that point, Buster Couch can throw the switch and send them on their way, and they both go up in smoke. Look at Prudhomme backpedaling his way down the racetrack to victory. Not a pretty win, but the Snake will take it any way he can. 5:67 is elapsed time. Just remember, just a few moments ago, Amato blasted through there at a 498, certainly putting him in the favorites role. Here in instant replay, you can see what Don Prudhomme went through. He backed out of the throttle, then got on it again and re-smoked the tires. Backed out of it again, got on it again, and the tires again up in smoke until they finally stuck to the pavement good enough to get Prudhomme across the finish line ahead of Gene Snow. Back in the pit area, Dale Armstrong is watching over Kenny Bernstein. A final test firing of the engine in the Budweiser K. Once again, Steve Evans.
Well, Snake, that's how you had to drive top fuel cars 25 years ago when you won your first title at Pomona.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of. Unfortunately, that's not the way we wanted to do it, but just got loose on it. It's a new day, so we're going to, fortunately, we got through, and we'll have to go back and see what it can do.
Thanks.
Don Prudhomme obviously subdued over that kind of performance. Look who's happy now, huh? Well, a little cheer and a round of applause will pick anybody's spirits up. Going to the winner. Here is Lori Johns at the wheel of the Jolly Rancher Candy's car, weaving her way back into the spot where her crew wants her to start from as she races Frank Hawley at the wheel of Darrell Gwynn's Coors Light Silver Bullet. Like Don Prudhomme, who preceded him down this racetrack, Frank Hawley is competing in his first ever Budweiser Classic. He qualified number 3. Lori's qualifying efforts throughout the entire season consistent enough to put her in the number 6 spot in this very tough field. A lot of the performance is the responsibility of the crew chief. Ken Beatty for Frank Hawley, Ron Swearingen for Lori Johns. And John smokes the tires right off the starting line. Frank Hawley across the finish line to a 5:01 at 281 miles an hour. The second quickest time of eliminations here in the Budweiser Classic. Lori Johns just coasting across, a disappointment for her as this car went up in smoke, and here's how it happened. Our instant replay camera shows the front wheels bouncing up off the pavement. She carried them a ways, but that was enough to unload the rear tires. They lost traction as Hawley thundered on down the quarter mile to take the victory and advance to the final 4, where he will race the driver for this crew chief. That's John Medlin working on the Skull Bandit of Don Prudhomme, the Snake, and Frank Hawley coming up just a little bit later. Back at the starting line, the last pair of cars in round 1. This is Kenny Bernstein, the Budweiser King. He's rolling those huge 17-inch wide Goodyear tires into a puddle of water, which helps them break loose on that long, smoky, tire-warming burnout. He is racing against the Super Shops car of Eddie Hill. Let's go down to the far end of the racetrack where Steve has found a gusher.
Well, Frank Hawley crawls out and sees that the aft portion of his race car is saturated in oil. It ran well at 5:01, but at some expense.
Well, you know, I always get in trouble for this from Ken because he says when he gave it to me, it wasn't oily, and when I bring it back, it looks like this. So he's probably going to talk to me about it.
Bolt him in the seat. We'll see how he does.
He used to do pretty darn good, I'll tell you.
Ken Benny, the crew chief, was indeed a fine driver. A lot of work to be done on this car.
Steve, nobody can do it quicker or better than the crew that Darrell Gwynn has assembled. Here's Fuzzy Carter. He's standing there like the Statue of Liberty. Actually, he's playing traffic cop as Eddie Hill backs up into his own tracks after a long burnout. One of the most popular drivers this sport has ever seen. Eddie's career started back in the 1950s. This is a battle of Texans. Kenny Bernstein, originally from the state of Texas, campaigned funny cars, of course, 4 Winston championships to his credit. He now is at the wheel of this top fuel dragster. For Eddie Hill, he had 2 number 1 qualifying positions throughout the season. That helped bolster him to the number 5 qualifying spot. Hill placed over here in the lane nearest the camera by Bernstein, the number 4 qualifier. He had the choice. And Eddie Hill loses traction. But Bernstein on a good pass runs a 5:08 at over 285 miles an hour. That advances him into the final 4. What a disappointment for Eddie Hill. He had been hoping for something just a little bit better. But again, the traction problems that have confronted every one of our racers in both lanes all day long bit Eddie Hill right here. Our instant replay shows you the smoke was intensive as a serious loss of traction set in right off the starting line. That win propels Kenny into the final 4, where who does he have to race? Mr. Quick, the 4:98 time by Joe Amato, giving him the favorites role and the lane choice. Don Prudhomme and his crew chief John Medlin, they've got to solve their tire smoking problem if they hope to mount a serious challenge to Frank Hawley. Remember, Frank blasted out that 5:01 victory in round number 1. Here's Kenny Bernstein headed back down the return road, getting his share of applause and cheers from the fans here at the Fairplex in Pomona, California. Meantime, back in the pit area, there's some serious thought going on between the brain trusts on the Team Valvoline car. Tim Richards, the crew chief, the driver, Joe Amato, plotting just what they're going to do to Kenny Bernstein. That's who they race in the final 4. Annual running of the Budweiser Classic for top fuel dragsters. Before we get into the final 4 round of competition, let me take just a moment to invite you to become a member of a very special organization, the National Hot Rod Association. For just $45 a year, you got 48 issues of National Dragster, a pad, pin, rule book, and a whole lot more. And if you order by calling the number on your screen, you'll get a free copy of Diamond P's home video, Drag Racing 90. Call today. Frank Hawley, the driver of Darrell Gwynn's Coors Light Silver Bullet, is certainly the favorite here. He logged a 5:01 in the first round of competition. He is up against Don Prudhomme, who absolutely blazed the tires right off of the Skull Bandit in his first round victory. Now Now Prudhomme has got double trouble. He is facing a lane that he did not run in the first round. He gets a chance now at the lane nearest the camera as Hawley has the lane choice with his great elapsed time. And Hawley goes up in smoke, and Prudhomme blazes the tires again. And luck is riding with Don Prudhomme today into the finals of the Budweiser Classic with an elapsed time of 5:46 at only 258 miles an hour. While Prudhomme celebrates, Hawley has got to be disappointed. He came into this race an obvious favorite with a much quicker elapsed time. You're looking at the hand of Tim Richards as he throws a valve in the fuel distribution system as the engine comes to life on Joe Amato's Team Valvoline car. And you know, Joe's got to be thinking about that run just a moment ago by Frank Hawley. It was right here in this lane, a round to go, that Amato blasted out that 498. Now he just watched Hawley go up in smoke. Kenny Bernstein's got to be thinking about the same thing. He just watched Don Prudhomme once again smoke the tires, this time in the lane that he has got to run in. Let's go to the far end and Steve.
Well, seldom, as you well know, Don, do you get 2 second chances like you've had today.
Yeah, it wasn't real pretty, but they say in drag racing, take it away and get it. I don't know what's going on. We're just off here. We're not able to get it hooked up, but fortunately, we got to stand another shot at it.
I'm sure you thought you'd found the problem.
Well, we thought we did, yeah, but it's just it's very, very violent, and we're going to have to get into the clutch area and look and see what's going on. We backed it up, but it isn't enough.
What Don Prudhomme is shooting at, by the way, is $50,000 that goes to the winner of this Budweiser Classic. Front end of Joe Amato's car. Crewman throwing a switch. That is the onboard data recorder switch. He activates it just before Joe comes up to the staging beam. So it will run throughout the entire run, giving them a log of the performance of the race car and the engine. Bernstein and Amato, this is the final four. The winner here goes into race against Don Prudhomme for that $50,000 championship. Amato supercharger, let's go, and Bernstein squeaks by at the finish line. Kenny Bernstein with a 5:14, 278-mile-an-hour run has got to be the luckiest guy, maybe even more so than Don Prudhomme. Watch what happened. Amato in the far lane had him covered like a blanket. Bernstein had a slight advantage off the starting line, but he had lost it by the time they passed our camera position. At the 1/8 of a mile, it was a car-length lead and then disaster. The supercharger backfired, a puff of flame, and look at Bernstein just squeaked by. That put him into the finals. From our onboard camera, pop. That's the supercharger exploding, the blower belt peeling back, and in the right-hand side of your screen, look at Bernstein.
Kenny Bernstein, you were off the mark first by about 200. Tell me about the rest of the race.
Well, I was watching Amato from behind. He come by so hard in the middle, it was unbelievable. I said, it's over with, and then I saw it and heard him pop, and we got around him. I couldn't believe it. I mean, they deserved to win that one. They were way ahead.
When the blower belt comes up like that, the car just goes away, just disappears from your vision.
Yeah, you look at the accelerometer, it just stops. It goes down the other way. It starts going backwards, and your chin hits the dash up here, and I couldn't believe it when I saw it have trouble, and we were still 2 car lengths behind. I said, I can't believe we're going to win this thing.
I know one race sponsor that's going to be very glad that this man is in the final round.
The 2 luckiest guys on this given day of racing will be meeting in the finals for $50,000. Kenny Bernstein against Don Prudhomme. Once again, Steve Evans.
If it were not for the lack of a belt that drives that supercharger, Joe Amato, you'd be going into your 7th final. Even Kenny Bernstein told me that.
Well, that wasn't the belt, Steve. Something in the motor backfired. I mean, you look, the blower boost panel is blown right out. I mean, it was some internal engine parts damage, and it just backfired, and we were over. And I was hoping I'd hold on. I didn't know where he was. Then I heard him coming, and he passed me just in time.
Well, you've had a lot of luck in this series. You can't complain. Almost $300,000 it's given you.
Yeah, it's been nice, but, you know, we had the faster car on that point, and if it held up to get down the track, it hurts when you lose like that, you know? That was your race, but yeah, what are you going to do? I was looking at the back end.
That will meet for the $50,000 top prize in the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. It is the Skoal Bandit, driven by Don Prudhomme, challenging the Budweiser King, Kenny Bernstein. Each of these drivers have used up every bit of luck they have just to make the final. For Bernstein, it was the break of the day when Joe Amato popped that supercharger in the final 4, letting Bernstein sneak by for the victory. For Prudhomme, he was fortunate enough that both of his competitors smoked the tires worse than he did, and he was bad enough. Here the lane choice went to Bernstein, a 5:14 to a terrible 5:46 by Prudhomme. You heard him talk with Steve Evans about what they had to do, go into the clutch, making the changes in the clutch settings, trying to get a hold of the pavement. Bernstein has had his share of problems as well. Earlier, Steve talked to both crew chiefs about what they did.
John Medlin, the only thing that may stand between you and your team and $50,000 is smoking tires. What are you going to do about it?
Well, it's a real concern of ours right now. The car seems to be making a lot of power, and we're going to try to tone the power down a little bit and just manage the rest of it with the clutch.
How do you tone it down?
The air will kind of take care of itself a little bit in that regard. Take a little bit less fuel volume out of it at idle, and we're going to try to soften up the clutch.
Dale, big-time engine problems. You're having to go to an old combination now, not another pair of cylinder heads like that.
No, that's the only pair we had, and we had a little fuel delivery problem that time, and it went a little lean. But you never know, Steve. This might be a blessing in disguise. That old motor we're putting back in is the one that ran 497 at Dallas just 2 weeks ago, so I don't feel we're going to be weak.
So let's get back to grinding the clutch discs.
So both of our finalists faced with big problems and big question marks. The answer, of course, will come at the finish line of the quarter mile here at the Fairplex. Kenny Bernstein at least has made 2 consistent runs in the mid-5 teens. The only thing Don Prudhomme has done today with any kind of regularity has been lose traction. And that is a problem that he has been facing on and off throughout this entire season. The work of the crew is completed under the watchful eyes of starter Buster Couch, who throws the switch to green. Prudhomme again up in smoke. Bernstein losing traction momentarily, but he is $50,000 richer as he wins the Budweiser Classic with a 5:14, 278 miles an hour. For Prudhomme, the answers were not to be found this day, as again the loss of traction put him out of contention in the championship round. They both left the starting line fairly well as we watch on our replay. But by the time Don Prudhomme had passed the 60-foot mark, his tires were ablaze. Bernstein lost traction out at mid-course, was able to recover, and drove through the finish line with that 5:14 victory. May not have matched the 497 that engine ran 2 weeks ago at Dallas, but it was enough to pick him up 50 grand.
Kenny says it was spinning the tires. Well, it spun the tires to $50,000 and a victory in the Bud Classic. Great job. Nice, solid performance.
Well, I appreciate it. It wasn't anything outstanding, but it's what it takes to win. Hats off to Don and those guys. They got here, and they did a great job. Again, Amato had us covered in the round before, but for Budweiser's sake, and this is the Budweiser King, we're glad to take the money for him.
Well, turn to the right, and you're going to get from Karen Holstein from Anheuser-Busch a beautiful gold-etched glass trophy. Here is Bud, Y, and Zer. And somewhere there's a check. Karen Holstein has it right here for $50,000 to Kenny Bernstein.
As the celebration continues, for Steve Evans, I'm Dave McClellan saying so long from Pomona, California. The 1991 NHRA Budweiser Classic has been brought to you by Quaker State. The Big Q is one tough motor oil. Coverage of the NHRA Budweiser Top Fuel Classic has been a presentation of Diamond P Sports in association with ESPN.